In the grim darkness of the far future, there are fates worse than death. Among the countless horrors that stalk the galaxy, few scenarios combine such perfect elements of tragedy, violence, and absurdity as what occurs when the unstoppable force of Ork ingenuity meets the immovable object of a slumbering world eater's dreadnought. This is a story of ancient rage meeting primitive cunning, of technology twisted by both chaos and greenskin hands, and of awakening to a nightmare that would break even the strongest mind. Imagine, if you will, a tomb of adamantium and ceramite, buried beneath the rubble of a forgotten battlefield. Inside this walking sarcophagus lies not a corpse, but something far worse. A consciousness, trapped between life and death, suspended in amniotic fluids and held in stasis sleep. This is no ordinary space marine, no proud son of the Emperor frozen in time. This is a world eater, a warrior of the 12th Legion, servant of Khorne, the blood god. His mind has been shattered by neural implants called the Butcher's Nails, devices that turn thought into agony and agony into rage. He has slept for 1,000 years, dreaming dreams of blood and slaughter, while the galaxy moved on without him. Now imagine the Orks, not one, not a warband, but a full wag, sweeping across this dead world like a green tide. They come not for conquest or glory, but for the simple joy of finding new things to break, to loot, to repurpose into weapons of even greater destruction. Among the wreckage of ancient battles, their sharp eyes spot something that makes their hearts beat faster with greedy excitement. It is big, it is metal, it has guns, and most importantly, it is theirs for the taking. What follows is a collision of two of the Warhammer 40k universe's most violent forces. On one side, creatures genetically engineered by the ancient Old Ones to be the perfect warriors, now devolved into brutal, cunning Xenos who believe that red makes things go faster, and that enough Daka is never enough. On the other, a transhuman killing machine corrupted by chaos, driven by implants that replace higher, thought with murderous instinct, entombed in a war machine, designed to wade through enemy armies like a reaper through wheat. When these two forces meet, when Ork ingenuity awakens ancient fury, the results are both catastrophic and darkly fascinating. This scenario is not just about violence, though there will be plenty of that. It is about the fundamental nature of these two factions, about what happens when technology meets belief, when ancient hatred confronts present ignorance, when a warrior awakens not to brothers in arms but to the very enemies he despises most. It is about the horror of consciousness returning after a millennium of darkness, only to discover that your body has been violated, your weapons modified, and your prison decorated with crude glyphs that offend every sense you possess. To understand the full scope of this nightmare, we must first understand both sides of this equation. We must delve into the bloody history of the World Eaters, trace the path that led them from loyal servants of the Emperor to bloodthirsty slaves of chaos. We must explore the technology of dreadnoughts, those walking tombs that offer eternal service at the cost of everything that makes life worth living. And we must examine the Ork menace, understanding not just their love of violence, but their unique relationship with technology, their cultural obsessions, and their peculiar form of pragmatic engineering. The World Eaters are not simply another Chaos Space Marine Legion. They are the physical embodiment of rage made manifest, warriors who have surrendered everything, including their sanity, to the pursuit of endless slaughter. Their Primarch, Angron, was found by the Emperor not as a triumphant leader, but as a broken slave, his brain mutilated by archaeotech devices designed to amplify aggression at the cost of all other emotion. When Angron insisted that his sons receive the same implants, the Emperor permitted it, and in doing so, sealed the fate of the entire 12th Legion. The Butcher's Nails are not merely cybernetic enhancements. They are torture devices, constantly stimulating the parts of the brain associated with aggression, while inhibiting those responsible for higher reasoning, empathy, and self-control. They literally replace portions of the brain, burrowing deep into the limbic system and spinal cord like parasitic tendrils. The original devices, those implanted in Angron himself, were sophisticated pieces of archaeotech from New Syria, designed with a cruel precision that even the Mechanicum could not fully replicate. What the World Eaters received were crude copies, imperfect approximations that achieved the same effect through brute force rather than elegant design. The implantation process itself was brutal. Early attempts by apothecary Galen Serlac resulted in a 100% mortality rate. The Astartes volunteers, already superhuman warriors capable of surviving wounds that would kill normal men instantly, simply died on the operating tables as the nails were hammered into their skulls and threaded through their brains. But Angron insisted, and eventually, the techniques improved enough that some subjects survived. Not all, not even most, but enough to begin transforming the entire legion. For a World Eater, every moment of peace is agony, every second without violence is suffering. The nails constantly fire, constantly stimulate, creating a baseline of pain that never fades. Imagine a migraine that never ends, a headache so severe it makes you want to claw your own skull open just to make it stop. Now imagine that the only thing that reduces this pain, the only relief available, comes from violence. The act of killing temporarily satisfies the nails, causes them to reduce their stimulation, grants a few precious moments of reduced agony. But that relief is temporary, measured in heartbeats rather than hours. As soon as the killing stops, as soon as the blood stops flowing, the pain returns. And with each cycle, each bout of violence followed by withdrawal, the baseline pain increases. The nails demand more and more to provide the same relief. What started as a need to occasionally shed blood becomes an insatiable hunger that drives World Eaters to seek out combat constantly, desperately, fighting not for glory or duty, but simply to feel something other than pain. The psychological effects extend beyond simple aggression. World Eaters lose the ability to form emotional connections, to feel anything beyond anger and the twisted pleasure that comes from violence. They cannot appreciate beauty. They cannot experience joy, love, compassion, empathy, all the emotions that make life worth living. All of these are burned away by the constant assault of the nails. What remains is a hollowed-out consciousness, aware of what has been lost but incapable of mourning it. Capable only of rage and the desperate quest for temporary relief through bloodshed. Some World Eaters, in their more lucid moments, understood what had been done to them. Veterans who had known life before the nails, warriors who remembered what it felt like to laugh with brothers or take satisfaction in a mission well executed. These Marines knew exactly what they had sacrificed. But by the time they understood, it was too late. The nails could not be removed without killing the host. And even if removal were possible, the brain damage they caused was permanent. The parts of the brain responsible for regulating emotion and reason were either damaged or entirely replaced by the implants. There was no going back, no cure, no escape except death. When the Horus heresy tore the Imperium apart, the World Eaters needed little convincing to join the rebellion. They had long since stopped fighting for the Emperor and had begun fighting simply to fight, to feel the blessed relief that came with combat. Their fall to Khorne was not a corruption but a homecoming, a recognition of the god they had been serving all along without knowing his name. Khorne, the blood god, the Lord of Skulls, cared nothing for loyalty or honor, only for the endless flow of blood and the eternal clash of weapons. For the World Eaters, this was perfection. But even among the damned, even among warriors who had given themselves fully to the god of war, there existed a special kind of hell. This was the fate of those who were too valuable to die, but too broken to continue fighting in their original forms. These were the World Eaters who were interred within Dreadnoughts, those massive war machines that served as both prison and weapon, life support and instrument of death. For a loyalist space marine, becoming a Dreadnought is considered a high honor. It means your service continues beyond what should have been your death, that your wisdom and experience will guide future generations, that you will stand as a living monument to your chapter's greatest values. You sleep away the centuries in stasis, awakened only for the most important battles or when your counsel is needed. Your brothers treat you with reverence, maintaining your tome with sacred oils and whispered prayers. For a World Eater, Becoming a dreadnought is something else entirely. It is a cage, a torture chamber from which there is no escape. The butcher's nails continue their work, even when the flesh they were implanted in has been reduced to a torso suspended in nutrient fluid. The rage does not diminish with the loss of limbs. The need for violence does not fade, because you can no longer feel the weight of a chinax in hands you no longer possess. If anything, it intensifies, becomes more pure, more distilled, until you are nothing but fury given mechanical form. The process of becoming a dreadnought begins with catastrophic injury, the kind of damage that would kill even a space marine if not addressed immediately. Perhaps an explosion has torn away legs and arms. Perhaps enemy fire has shredded the torso, leaving only the vital organs and brain intact. Perhaps poison or disease has ravaged the body, destroying muscle and bone while leaving consciousness mercifully or unmercifully preserved. The apothecaries make their assessment, weighing the warrior's value against the resources required to preserve him, and if the decision is made to proceed, the real horror begins. The remaining flesh is cut away, everything deemed non-essential removed with surgical precision. Arms go first, then legs, then more and more until all that remains is a torso containing the essential organs: heart, lungs, portions of the digestive system, needed to process the nutrient fluid that will sustain the pilot. The head is preserved intact, though even here modifications are made. Additional ports drilled into the skull to accommodate the neural interfaces that will connect the pilot to his new body. This butchered remnant is then suspended in amniotic fluid within an armored sarcophagus, connected to life support systems that will maintain it indefinitely. Neural interfaces are plugged directly into the brain, creating connections that allow the pilot to control the dreadnought as if it were his original body. In theory, the transition should be seamless. The pilot thinks, move forward, and the dreadnought moves forward, thinks, fire weapon, and the weapon fires. In practice, especially for world eaters, the reality is far more complicated. The sensory experience of being a dreadnought is fundamentally alien. You no longer feel temperature, no longer experience the sensation of breathing or the beat of your heart. You cannot taste or smell. Touch is reduced to pressure sensors that report contact, but not texture, not warmth, not any of the subtle information that makes physical interaction meaningful. Vision comes through optical sensors that see differently than biological eyes, and hearing through audio receptors that process sound in ways human ears do not. For a normal space marine, these changes are traumatic enough. For a world eater, they represent an additional layer of torture. The butcher's nails evolved alongside their host body, learning to interface with nerves and muscles, developing patterns of stimulation that provided the most effective control. Now, suddenly, that body is gone, replaced with mechanical systems that respond differently, that provide different feedback. The nails must adapt, must find new pathways, new ways to inflict their particular brand of agony. And they do adapt, unfortunately, becoming, if anything, more efficient in the process. World Eaters' dreadnoughts are not revered by their brothers. They are feared. When not in battle, they are shackled, their weapons locked, their movements restricted. This is not done out of disrespect, but out of necessity. A World Eater's dreadnought, awakened in the wrong place at the wrong time, will kill anything within reach, friend or foe, until either it is destroyed or there is nothing left to kill. They scream constantly, their vox speakers broadcasting an endless litany of rage and pain, cursing everything that has been done to them, everything they have become. The screaming is not mere noise. It is communication, of a sort, the only way these entombed warriors can express the depth of their suffering. They scream about the pain, about the rage, about the loss of their bodies, and the violation of their consciousness. They scream prayers to Khorne, begging for the blessed release of true death. They scream at their brothers, blaming them for this fate, for not letting them die with honor on the battlefield. They scream at themselves, at the weakness that led to their injuries, at the pride that made them accept this life instead of demanding execution. Some World Eaters' dreadnoughts retain enough awareness to recognize the futility of their screaming, to understand that no one is listening, that no relief will come. These are perhaps the most tragic cases, consciousness trapped in full knowledge of its situation, aware of every moment of suffering, counting the centuries as they pass with perfect recall. Others descend into a kind of madness that is almost merciful, their minds fracturing under the strain, becoming collections of instincts and reflexes rather than coherent personalities. They still fight with terrible efficiency, but they no longer remember why, no longer care about anything except the next kill, the next moment of relief from the nail's demands. The sleep of a dreadnought is not peaceful rest. It is enforced unconsciousness, a chemical and mechanical suppression of awareness that keeps the pilot from going completely insane during the long centuries between battles. But even in sleep, the mind continues to work, to dream, to process. For a world-eater dreadnought, those dreams are nightmares of the highest order. The butcher's nails do not sleep. They continue their work, stimulating the parts of the brain that remain, creating phantom sensations of violence and pain. The pilot dreams of battles that never happened, of enemies that never existed, of killing and being killed in an endless loop that blurs the line between memory and imagination. 1,000 years of this. 1,000 years of darkness broken only by brief, violent awakenings. 1,000 years of dreams filled with blood and fire, of phantom limbs that ache for weapons they can no longer hold, of a throat that screams soundlessly into the void. The pilot enters stasis as a world-eater, a transhuman warrior corrupted by chaos, but still possessing some core of identity, some sense of self. After a millennium, what emerges is something else. Something that barely remembers its own name, that knows only rage and pain, and the desperate need to make something, anything, hurt as much as it does. Now consider what this means for our scenario. Somewhere on a dead world, a world that has seen countless battles and countless deaths, a world-eater's dreadnought lies dormant. Perhaps it fell in battle, and its warband was forced to retreat before they could recover it. Perhaps it was deliberately left behind, too damaged or too unstable to be worth salvaging. Perhaps its brothers simply forgot about it in the chaos of some greater campaign, and it has lain here ever since. Its power slowly draining, its life support gradually failing, its consciousness trapped in an ever-deepening nightmare. The world around it has changed in ways impossible to imagine. Empires have risen and fallen. Wars have been fought and forgotten. The very landscape has been transformed by bombardment and terraforming and the simple passage of time. But the dreadnought knows none of this. It sleeps on, its internal chronometer ticking away the centuries, its failsafe preventing it from awakening, until some external stimulus triggers its ancient protocols. And then the Orks arrive. To understand what happens next, we must understand the Orks themselves, these creatures that embody both the horror and the dark humor that permeates the Warhammer 40k universe. Orks are not native to the galaxy, at least not in their current form. They are the degraded descendants of warriors created by the Old Ones during the War in Heaven. That ancient conflict that nearly destroyed reality itself. The Old Ones, in their desperate struggle against the Titan and Necrons, engineered the perfect soldiers aggressive, adaptable, and capable of reproduction through spores rather than traditional breeding. These warriors, known as the Krork, were supposedly sophisticated beings, capable of advanced tactics and strategic thinking. The Orks are what became of the Krork after millions of years of evolution and devolution. They retain the aggression and resilience of their ancestors, but have lost much of their sophistication. What remains is a species that lives entirely for war, that derives genuine pleasure from violence, and that possesses a unique form of psychic ability that makes their technology function through sheer collective belief. This last point is crucial to understanding how Orks interact with technology. Ork tech appears ramshackle, cobbled together from scrap and held together with what seems like pure optimism. To human eyes, many Ork weapons should not function at all. The mechanisms are wrong. The ammunition is the wrong caliber, the power sources are insufficient. But they work anyway, because enough Orks believe they will work. This is not mere superstition. It is a real psychic phenomenon, a low-level reality, warping field generated by the collective unconscious of the Ork race. Red vehicles go faster because Orks believe red is the fastest color. Guns that should jam after a single shot fire continuously, because the Ork pulling the trigger knows with absolute certainty that more Daka means more dead enemies. This peculiar relationship with technology makes Orks the galaxy's most enthusiastic and least discriminating looters. They will take anything that looks useful and attempt to incorporate it into their own designs. Imperial Guard tanks become battle wagons. Space Marine weapons become big shooters. Even sophisticated technology like Tall battle suits or Eldar Grav tanks can be looted, stripped down, and rebuilt into something that barely resembles the original but somehow still functions. Orks are organized into a brutal hierarchy based entirely on size and strength. The biggest Ork is the boss, and his authority extends exactly as far as his ability to beat other Orks into submission. This leads to constant challenges. Constant fighting among the Orks themselves, which they consider perfectly normal and even enjoyable. Only when united under a particularly powerful war boss do Orks coalesce into the massive migrations called wogs, green tides that sweep across entire sectors of space, consuming everything in their path. Within this hierarchy exist specialized castes called oddboys, Orks who are genetically predisposed to excel at particular tasks. Mech boys are the engineers and mechanics of Ork society, possessed of an instinctive understanding of technology that allows them to build and repair things without formal training. Pain boys serve as doctors and surgeons, though their methods would horrify any Imperial medica. Weird boys are psychers, channeling the psychic energy of nearby Orks into devastating attacks. Each type of oddboy is respected for their unique skills, exempt from the usual requirement of being the biggest to command respect. The mech boys are particularly important to our scenario. These are the Orks who will first encounter the dormant Dreadnought, who will make the decision about what to do with it, who will attempt to understand and modify this ancient war machine. Mech boys approach technology with a mixture of reverence and irreverence. They understand that some things are sacred, that some machines have spirits that must be appeased. But they also believe that anything can be improved with enough hammering, welding, and the liberal application of armor plates and weapons. When a mech boy looks at a piece of technology, he sees not what it is but what it could be. A broken tank is not junk, it is the foundation for a new battle wagon. A damaged weapon is not trash, it is spare parts for something even bigger and louder. This optimism, this refusal to see anything as truly broken or useless, is part of what makes Orks such a persistent threat. They can create armies from scrap, build fleets from wreckage, turn defeat into eventual victory simply by picking up the pieces and trying again. Now imagine such a mech boy, accompanied by his crew of Gretchen assistants, and perhaps a few boys for protection, picking through the ruins of an ancient battlefield. They are looking for scrap, for anything that can be salvaged and sold or rebuilt. The battlefield is old enough that most of the easy pickings are long gone, looted by previous wogs or scavengers. But the mech boy is persistent, and his keen eye spots something unusual buried beneath layers of rubble and half-melted ceramite. At first, it looks like just another piece of wreckage, indistinguishable from the countless other destroyed vehicles and war machines that litter the field. But as the Gretchen clear away the debris, as more of the object is revealed, the mech boy's excitement grows. This is not some ordinary tank or transport. This is something special, something powerful. The armor is thicker than anything he has seen before, covered in symbols and decorations that hurt to look at too long. The shape is roughly humanoid, suggesting sophisticated locomotion systems, and most importantly, it is big, really big. The kind of big that makes a mech's heart beat faster, with visions of the mayhem such a machine could cause. The mech boy circles the object, his mind already racing with possibilities. He can see the weapon mounts, the power claw frozen in mid-swing, the massive cannon that dominates one arm. He can see the damage that brought this thing down, the scored armor and punctured plating that speaks of some ancient battle. But he can also see that the core structure is intact, that with work, with the right parts. With enough hammering and welding and probably some explosives, this thing could walk again. Date's a proper big thing, dat is. He mutters to himself, running his hands over the cold metal. Could put some more dakka on it, maybe some armor plates. Definite needs more red, make it go faster. One of the boys, a particularly dim specimen even by Ork standards, peers at the strange symbols decorating the Dreadnought's chassis. Boss, what's dem marky things mean? The mech boy squints at the symbols. They are Chaos icons, dedications to Khorne, battle honors from 1,000 different campaigns. To anyone familiar with the marks of chaos, they would be instantly recognizable, a warning that this machine has been touched by powers that should not be trifled with. But the Ork sees only decorations, crude paintings that mean nothing to him. Don't matter what they mean, the mech boy declares. Was gonna paint over 'em anyway. Gonna make it all proper Orky-like. The decision is made. This thing, whatever it is coming back to the Ork camp. The mech boy sends the Gretchen scurrying off to fetch chains and pulleys, and whatever vehicles can be spared for the hauling. The boys are detailed to guard the site, to make sure no other Orks try to claim this prize. Within hours, the entire operation is in motion, dozens of Orks working together to extract the Dreadnought from its resting place. It takes the better part of a day to free the machine from the rubble. The Dreadnought is heavy, far heavier than it appears, and moving it requires considerable effort even for Orks. Several Gretchen are crushed in the process, which the mech boy considers an acceptable loss. The important thing is that the prize is secured, dragged onto a flatbed truck, and transported back to the mech's workshop for closer examination. The workshop is a ramshackle structure, part garage, part forge, part junkyard. It is filled with half-completed projects, piles of scrap metal, barrels of fuel and ammunition, and an array of tools that would make any Imperial tech marine weep. The Dreadnought is deposited in the center of this controlled chaos, and the mech boy begins his examination in earnest. He starts with the exterior, noting the various weapon systems and how they might be improved. The assault cannon is interesting, powerful and capable of sustained fire, but to the mech boy's eyes, it could be bigger, louder, more orky. He imagines adding additional barrels, increasing the rate of fire, maybe incorporating some of the ammunition feeds from captured Ork weapons to give it more flexibility. The Power Fist is impressive, a massive weapon that could crush ceramite and bone with equal ease, but it lacks the raw, brutal aesthetic that Orks prefer. It needs spikes, he decides, lots of spikes, and maybe a big chopper blade welded to the fingers for extra killy-ness. The mech boy makes notes, or rather, he makes scratches and symbols on a piece of scrap metal that only he can interpret, planning his modifications. He circles the Dreadnought slowly, assessing each system, each component, building a mental picture of what this machine could become once he is finished with it. The armor is thick, far thicker than most vehicles he has worked on, which is good because it means he can add even more armor without worrying about the frame collapsing. The power plant is obviously sophisticated, probably running on some kind of fusion or plasma reactor, which means plenty of energy for additional weapons and systems. But as he examines the machine more closely, he begins to notice things that puzzle him. The armor is not just thick, it is layered, with inner and outer plates separated by complex structures that seem designed to dissipate energy. The weapon mounts are not simple pivot points, but sophisticated articulated joints that allow for precise aiming and rapid traversal. The legs, when he inspects them, contain multiple redundant hydraulic systems and what appear to be gyrostabilizers that would allow the machine to maintain balance, even on the worst terrain. This is not crude technology, not something bolted together by species who barely understand what they are doing. This is sophisticated engineering, the work of people who knew exactly what they wanted to achieve and had the skill to achieve it. The mech boy does not think in these terms, exactly, does not have the vocabulary to express the concept of elegant design versus brute force construction, but he recognizes quality when he sees it. This machine was built to last, built to fight, built by people who understood war in ways even Orks respect. Then he notices something that makes him pause. There are sealed hatches, access panels that have been welded shut from the inside. This is unusual. Most machines have maintenance access, ways to reach the internal components for repair and service. But these hatches are blocked deliberately, as if whoever was inside wanted to make sure nothing could get in, or perhaps that nothing could get out. The welds are thick. Amateur work rather than clean machine welding, suggesting they were done in the field rather than in a proper workshop. The mech boy's curiosity is piqued. What is inside this machine? What makes it tick? How can he possibly improve it without understanding how it works? The Orks value their mech boys, not just for their ability to build things, but for their insatiable curiosity about how things work. A proper mech is not content to accept a machine as it is. He needs to understand it, to take it apart and put it back together, to know every bolt and wire and circuit. He summons more Gretchen, orders them to bring cutting torches and prying tools. The little creatures scurry off, returning moments later dragging equipment that seems far too large for them. If the hatches will not open normally, he will make them open. After all, everything yields to enough force, and subtlety is for gits who do not have hammers. The work begins. The mech boy directs his Gretchen to the access panels, showing them where to cut, where to apply the torches. The little creatures work nervously, aware that they are doing something that feels wrong. That opening a sealed container is always risky in their experience. But they are more afraid of the mech boy than of whatever might be inside, so they continue their work. The bright glare of cutting torches illuminating the dim workshop. It takes hours of work, but eventually, one of the access panels is breached. The cutting torch slices through the last of the welds, and the panel falls away with a metallic clang that rings through the workshop. The Gretchen immediately scatter, hiding behind piles of scrap in case something dangerous emerges. The mech boy, braver or perhaps simply more curious, approaches the opening, his tools ready, his mind racing with possibilities. He peers into the opening, trying to make sense of what he sees. The interior of the Dreadnought is a maze of complexity. Systems layered upon systems, cables bundled together in thick sheaths, pipes carrying fluids between components. There are tanks of some kind, their surfaces covered in warning labels and hazard symbols that the mech boy cannot read. There are mechanical components that hum with stored energy, their purpose mysterious but clearly important. And throughout it all, woven like a nervous system, are neural interfaces, thin cables of fiber, optic material that pulse with data transmission. But at the center of all this, suspended in a tank that glows with a sickly green light from internal illumination, is something that stops the mech boy cold. It is organic, unmistakably alive despite being surrounded by machines. A torso, scarred and mutilated, floating in fluid that keeps it from decay. Arms and legs are absent, removed with surgical precision long ago. The skin is pale, almost translucent, marked with old scars and fresh surgical modifications. And protruding from the skull, clearly visible even through the murky fluid, are metal cables, dozens of them, running from the head into the surrounding machinery like the tentacles of some mechanical parasite. This is a living creature, not a robot, not a servitor constructed from vat-grown flesh. This is something that was once whole, once independent, now reduced to this state and trapped within the machine that has become its body. The mech boy has looted many things in his career, has taken apart vehicles and weapons from every race in the galaxy, but this is something new, something he has never encountered before. Zoganil, he breathes, loud enough that the hiding Gretchen hear and cautiously emerge from their hiding places. There's a git in ear, an actual real git. This is a complication, but also an opportunity. The mech boy had assumed this was simply a machine, a robot or drone that could be reprogrammed or repurposed. The presence of a living pilot changes things, makes the project more challenging, but also more interesting. If he can figure out how to control the pilot, or at least how to work around it, he will have something truly unique. A war machine with the intelligence of a living being, but the power of Ork engineering. He needs to understand the systems. He traces the cables, follows the tubes, tries to determine what each component does. The life support is obvious: pumps that circulate the fluid, filters that remove waste products, temperature controls that keep everything at optimal levels. The neural interfaces are more complex: junction boxes where signals from the brain are translated into machine commands, where sensor data is converted back into signals the organic brain can process. Some of the technology is recognizable, at least in principle. The mech-boy has worked with neural interfaces before, simple devices that allow Orks to control vehicles with their thoughts, though those systems are crude compared to what he is seeing here. Other parts are complete mysteries, components whose purpose he can only guess at. Covered in symbols and inscriptions in languages he cannot read, he begins to experiment, carefully at first, then with increasing confidence as he realizes the systems are robust enough to handle some prodding. He disconnects cables to see what happens, noting which systems fail when particular connections are lost. He traces power flows, mapping the electrical pathways through the machine. He even taps into some of the data streams, watching the flow of information between different subsystems, trying to understand the machine's internal logic. In his exploration, he finds what appears to be a control node, a junction box where multiple systems converge. It is covered in switches and dials, all labeled in Gothic script that means nothing to the mech-boy. But he can see patterns, can recognize that some controls seem to regulate power flow, while others manage communication between systems. Some switches are in what appears to be the off position, others are set to on, and a few are somewhere in between, as if someone started to flip them and then changed their mind. One switch in particular catches his attention. It is larger than the others, connected to thicker cables, clearly something important based on the amount of infrastructure devoted to it. The switch is currently in the middle position, neither fully on nor fully off, and that seems wrong to the mech-boy's engineer's instincts. Switches should be binary, one state or the other, not stuck in between where they serve no clear purpose. The temptation is overwhelming. What mech could resist flipping switches to see what they do? What engineer would not want to test every control, to understand what each one manages? The mech-boy reaches for the switch, his thick fingers closing around it, and with a firm motion, he flips it to the full-on position. The switch moves with surprising ease, clicking into the full-on position. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the Dreadnought begins to hum, a deep vibration that builds slowly, resonating through the metal frame. Lights that have been dark for a millennium flicker to life. The life support tanks begin to bubble and churn. The cables connecting the pilot to the machine suddenly pulse with energy, data flowing through them at rates they have not handled in centuries. The mech-boy steps back, suddenly uncertain. This was supposed to be a dead machine, a project he could work on at his leisure. But now it is coming to life, powering up, and he has no idea what it will do when it fully awakens. Inside the sarcophagus, inside the tomb of flesh and metal that has been his prison for 10 centuries, consciousness returns to the World Eater. It does not return gently. There is no gradual awakening, no slow climb from the depths of sleep to the surface of awareness. One moment there is nothing, the absolute void of enforced unconsciousness. The dreams of blood that have been his only companions for so long. The next, there is pain awareness, the sudden shocking realization that he exists, that he is awake, that something is happening. The transition is violent, brutal, like being torn from deep water and thrust into harsh sunlight. His consciousness, compressed by centuries of stasis into something small and dense, suddenly expands, filling the neural pathways, reaching out through the interfaces to touch the machine that has become his body. Sensors that have been dormant for a millennium flood his awareness with data temperature readings, pressure sensors, power levels, structural integrity reports. It is overwhelming, a torrent of information that threatens to drown his newly awakened mind. The butcher's nails scream their greeting. They have been waiting for this, waiting for consciousness to return so they can resume their work. During stasis, they remain dormant, their function suppressed by the chemical cocktail that kept the pilot unconscious. But the moment awareness sparks in his brain, they activate, digging in like claws made of lightning, stimulating every pain receptor, every aggressive impulse, everything that makes him what he is. The agony is immediate and total. A white, hot spike driven through his mind, and with it comes the rage, the need to kill, to destroy, to make something pay for the suffering he endures. His first conscious thought, if it can be called thought rather than pure instinct, is murder. Not strategic consideration of enemies, not tactical assessment of his situation. Just the overwhelming need to kill something, anything, to satisfy the demands of the nails and gain those precious moments of relief. But there is confusion too, a disorientation that comes from the massive temporal displacement he has experienced. The last thing he remembers is battle, though the details are hazy, filtered through the red lens of perpetual rage that colors all his memories. He tries to recall the specifics. What battle was it? What world? What enemy? The memories are there. He can feel them, but they are slippery, refusing to coalesce into concrete images and facts. There was gunfire, he remembers that much. The roar of his assault cannon. The satisfying crunch of armor under his power fist. There was an enemy, numerous and well armed, giving him a proper fight. And there was the moment when something went wrong, when damage too severe for even his enhanced systems to ignore forced him back, forced shutdown protocols to engage. Then darkness. Then nothing. Then this moment, this awakening into pain and confusion and rage. But there is confusion too. The last thing he remembers is battle, though he cannot recall the details. There was an enemy, he thinks, though he is not sure what kind. There was gunfire and explosions, and the glorious feeling of his power fist crushing armor and bone. And then there was darkness, sudden and complete, and the awareness that he had been damaged, that he was falling, that stasis was claiming him once more. How long has it been? Hours, days, months, his internal chronometer, when he focuses on it through the haze of pain and rage, tells him a number that makes no sense. 1,000 years. He has been asleep for 1,000 years. That cannot be right. That is too long. No one sleeps that long. The chronometer must be damaged, must be malfunctioning like so many other systems that he can feel flickering in and out of function. He attempts to access his weapons, to ready himself for combat. The response is sluggish, delayed, wrong. The assault cannon does not respond at all to his commands. The power fist twitches but will not fully activate. The whole machine feels strange, off balance, as if parts have been removed or replaced with components that do not quite fit. And there are sounds, strange sounds that should not be present, the clanking of metal on metal, voices speaking in a language he does not recognize. His optical senses come online. Though they too are behaving strangely, the visual feed flickering and occasionally inverting to show only static. But in the brief moments of clarity, he sees something that makes his rage spike even higher. He sees orcs, greenskins, xenos, the enemies of mankind, the enemies of Khorne. Disgusting creatures that should be crushed beneath his feet. They are everywhere, swarming around him, poking at his armor, disconnecting cables, chattering to each other in their crude language. One of them, larger than the others, is doing something to his weapon systems. Another is painting something on his leg. Crude red symbols that offend every sense he possesses. They are defiling him, violating his machine, and there is nothing he can do about it, because his systems will not respond, will not obey his commands. The rage builds, fed by the butcher's nails, amplified by the 1,000 years of accumulated fury that has had no outlet. He tries to move, to swing his weapons, to activate anything that will let him kill these creatures that dare to touch him. But the machine is locked down, the safety protocols still engaged, the neural connections not fully initialized. He is awake, but he is not in control. He is aware, but he is helpless. This is a new kind of torture, a refinement of suffering that even the butcher's nails could not have anticipated. To be conscious, to be aware of enemies within reach, to feel the rage burning through every neural pathway, but to be unable to act, unable to kill, unable to do anything but watch as the orcs continue their work. It is almost enough to drive him beyond madness, beyond rage, into some new state that has no name. The World Eater begins to scream. His vox speakers, thankfully, still work, and he pours all his fury into that sound, broadcasting his rage to anyone who will listen. It is not words. It is not even really language. It is pure emotion given voice. A howl of hatred and pain that echoes through the mech's workshop and beyond, causing nearby orcs to flinch and cover their ears. The mech boy jumps back from the Dreadnought, startled by the sudden noise.
Zorganek! It's awake!
The other orcs scatter, unsure how to react. Some grab weapons, preparing for a fight. Others simply run, not willing to risk being near something that sounds that angry. The Gretchen vanish entirely, disappearing into the various holes and crevices they use to hide from danger. But the mech boy, after his initial surprise, does not flee. Instead, he studies the Dreadnought with newfound interest. It is awake, yes, but it is not attacking. It is not moving at all, in fact, despite the rage in its voice. That means the safety protocols are working, that the machine is still under some form of control. This is good. This means he can work with it, can figure out how to either properly control the pilot, or at least how to point it in the right direction when it finally gets loose. He approaches the Dreadnought again cautiously, keeping out of range of its weapons just in case. "Easy dear, big thing," he says, as if talking to a particularly upset squig. "Was just trying to help, we is. Gonna make you all proper again. Gonna give you more Daka. You like Daka, don't ya?" The only response is more screaming, more incoherent rage pouring through the vox speakers. The mech boy shrugs. He has worked with cranky machines before. This one is just a bit crankier than most. Over the next several days, the mech boy and his crew continue their work, carefully working around the now conscious and constantly screaming Dreadnought. They discover that as long as they do not try to activate the weapon systems or release the safety locks, the machine remains immobile, unable to do more than scream and occasionally twitch its weapon arms. This is acceptable. It gives them time to make their improvements. The modifications are extensive. The assault cannon is removed and replaced with a larger weapon cobbled together from parts of multiple orc shooters and at least one heavy bolter. It will fire more rounds per second than the original, though accuracy may suffer. The power fist is reinforced with additional armor plates and fitted with a buzzing chainblade salvaged from a looted Imperial vehicle. The legs are strengthened with extra pistons and hydraulics, meant to increase speed and jumping ability, though whether they will actually work is anyone's guess. Most importantly, the Dreadnought is repainted. The original color scheme, the crimson and brass of the World Eaters, is covered over with crude red paint applied by multiple Gretchen-wielding brushes they barely know how to hold. The chaos symbols are painted over, replaced with orc glyphs and totems. Skulls are welded to the chassis, though whether these are meant as decorations or trophies is unclear. By the time the mech boy is finished, the Dreadnought barely resembles its original form. It is bigger, cruder, and undeniably more orky. Throughout all of this, the World Eater continues to scream. He watches every modification with growing horror and rage. They are defiling his war machine, his tomb, his sacred armor. They are replacing blessed weapons with Xenos technology, covering holy inscriptions with crude paintings, turning him into a mockery of what he once was. The butcher's nails have nothing to do now but amplify this rage, to take the existing fury and multiply it until it fills every moment of consciousness. But he also learns, despite the pain, despite the rage, some part of him that retains the tactical thinking of a space marine observes and analyzes. He maps the modifications, understands what has been changed and what remains the same. He tests the neural connections, finds the pathways that still respond to his commands, identifies the systems that the orcs have unwittingly reconnected or repaired. Most importantly, he locates the safety locks, the protocols that are keeping him immobile, and begins to probe them, looking for weaknesses, for vulnerabilities, for any way to override them. The orcs, he realizes, do not understand what they have. They think they have found a powerful weapon, a machine they can control and direct. They do not comprehend that inside this machine is not a docile pilot, not a servitor or enslaved mind, but a World Eater, a servant of Khorne. A warrior who has spent 1,000 years dreaming of violence and who now has a very clear focus for his rage. On the 5th day of work, the mech boy decides it is time to test his creation. The modifications are complete, the systems are as ready as they are ever going to be, and he is eager to see what this thing can do. He gathers a crowd of orcs, wanting witnesses to his brilliance, and prepares to disable the safety protocols and give the pilot limited control of the machine. Now Den, he announces to his audience, was gonna see if dis big git can walk. I set it so's can move around a bit, test his legs, dat sort of thing. He's still gonna be locked down on his weapons, so don't worry none about getting shot. Probably. Several of the watching orcs look less than convinced by this reassurance, but none of them leave. The prospect of seeing the giant machine move is too exciting to miss, even if there is some risk involved. The mech boy approaches a control panel he has rigged, a collection of switches and levers that connect to the Dreadnought's command systems. He has no idea what half of these controls do, but that has never stopped him before. He begins flipping switches, releasing locks, disabling safeties that were put in place specifically to prevent what he is about to attempt. Inside the Dreadnought, the World Eater feels the barriers falling away, feels control returning to systems that have been locked for days. His connection to the machine's legs strengthens, becomes solid and responsive. The servos and pistons begin to respond to his commands, first in small twitches, then in larger movements. He can walk. After days of forced immobility, after 1,000 years of dreaming, he can finally walk. The Dreadnought takes its first step, and the orcs cheer. The machine is massive, easily 3 times the height of the mech boy, and when its foot comes down, the impact shakes the ground. It takes another step, then another, its movements becoming smoother as the pilot relearns how to operate the machine after so long in stasis. The mech boy is delighted. His creation works! The orcs applaud his genius, slap him on the back, shout praise in their crude language. This is the greatest thing he has ever built, the crowning achievement of his career as a mech. He begins to imagine the devastation this machine will cause, the enemies it will destroy, the glory it will bring to the Wig. But he has made a critical error. In his excitement to see the machine move, in his eagerness to test his modifications, he has failed to properly secure all the safety systems. More specifically, he has left a backdoor, a vulnerability in the weapon control lockout that someone clever enough, someone familiar enough with the underlying architecture might be able to exploit. The World Eater is both clever enough and familiar enough. While the orcs celebrate, while they congratulate themselves on their success, he is working, probing the lockout systems, following neural pathways, finding the flaw in the mech boy's programming. It takes him 3 minutes to locate the vulnerability. It takes him another 30 seconds to exploit it, to force his way past the lockout and seize control of his weapons. The assault cannon comes online, its barrel beginning to spin. The power fist activates, energy crackling along the chain blade the orcs have attached to it. The Dreadnought stops walking and stands perfectly still for one long moment. Then it rotates its torso toward the crowd of celebrating orcs. The mech boy sees the weapon tracking toward him and has just enough time to realize his mistake. Oh, that's not good. The assault cannon opens fire, and the mech's workshop explodes into chaos. The weapon, modified by the orcs to fire faster and louder, lives up to its new specifications. Shells pour from the barrel in a continuous stream, ripping through orc bodies with devastating effect. The orcs barely have time to react before the first rank is cut down, bodies torn apart by mass, reactive rounds. Those who survive the initial burst scatter, some running for weapons, others simply running, all of them bellowing in confusion and panic. But the Dreadnought is faster. The modifications to its legs, the additional pistons and hydraulics, work better than the mech boy could have hoped. The machine lunges forward with speed that should be impossible for something its size, covering the distance to the fleeing orcs in seconds. The power fist descends, and an orc vanishes beneath it, crushed into paste. The chainblade revs, and another orc is bisected, his upper half sliding away from his lower half as his brain tries to process what just happened. The assault cannon continues to fire, tracking and killing anything that moves. Anything that looks remotely like a target. The World Eater does not roar or shout. He does not waste breath on battle cries or declarations. He simply kills. Methodically and efficiently, working his way through the Orks with the precision of someone who has spent 10,000 years, 1,000 years awake and 9,000 years dreaming, learning how to murder. Each movement is perfect, each shot placed exactly where it needs to be, each swing of the power fist, timed to catch an Ork exactly as he tries to dodge. The butcher's nails are singing. For the first time in a millennium, they are satisfied, their demands being met, their purpose fulfilled. The pilot feels the blessed relief that comes with violence, feels the pain receding as blood flows and skulls are taken. He is home. This is what he was made for, what he has always done, what he will do until he is finally destroyed and can know peace. More Orks arrive, drawn by the noise and the screaming. Some come to fight, thinking this is just another challenge, another scrap to be won. Others come to see what all the commotion is about. All of them die. The Dreadnought is tireless, its ammunition seemingly endless, its fury undiminished by time or the number of enemies it faces. For every Ork that falls, 2 more arrive, and the workshop becomes a abattoir. A charnel house where the floors run thick with blood, and the walls are painted with gore. The warboss of this particular tribe, attracted by the sustained gunfire and the reports of something big killing all his boys, arrives with his personal retinue of meganobs. He is a massive specimen even by Ork standards, standing nearly 8 feet tall and armored in crude power armor, welded together from looted space marine plate and heavy vehicle armor. In one hand, he carries a power claw big enough to tear through tank armor. In the other, he wields a shooter that would normally require 2 Orks to carry. He surveys the carnage, sees the bodies of dozens of his boys scattered around the workshop, and his eyes narrow. Right then. He growls, his voice amplified by his armor's Vox system. Something's been messin' with me, boys. Time to show dis git who's da biggest. The warboss and his meganobs advance, their heavy boots crushing bodies as they close on the still, killing Dreadnought. These are not ordinary boys. These are veteran warriors, survivors of 100 battles, armored in the best gear the tribe can provide. They have killed space marines before, have torn apart Imperial knights, have faced down the worst the galaxy can throw at them, and emerged victorious. They do not fear this machine, no matter how many boys it has killed. The Dreadnought turns to face them, its assault cannon swinging around to target this new threat. For a moment, chaos-corrupted warrior and Ork warboss lock eyes, or at least optical sensors. There is a mutual recognition there, an understanding that passes between 2 creatures who live entirely for combat. This will not be like the slaughter of the lesser Orks. This will be a real fight, the kind both of them live for. Then the shooting starts. The assault cannon roars, pouring fire into the advancing Orks. But these meganobs are built to take punishment, their armor thick enough to shrug off hits that would kill normal Orks. The shells spark and ricochet, doing damage but not enough to stop the charge. The warboss returns fire with his shooter, the crude weapon blazing, and several of his shots find their mark, scoring the Dreadnought's armor. The 2 forces collide in the center of the workshop. The Dreadnought's power fist crashes into a meganob's chest, the chain blade screaming as it chews through armor and flesh. The impact sends shockwaves through both combatants, metal groaning under stress that would shatter lesser materials. The meganob staggers but does not fall immediately, his orcish physiology and heavy armor buying him precious seconds. He raises his power claw, preparing for a counter-strike, but the Dreadnought is faster. The chain blade bites deeper, finding the weak points in the mega armor. And with a tremendous wrench, the World Eater tears the weapon free, bringing half the meganob's torso with it. The meganob falls, his death buying time for his brothers to close. Power claws activate, their energy fields crackling to life, hydraulic muscles tensing as they prepare to strike. The meganobs are not subtle warriors. They do not feint or maneuver for advantage. They simply wade in, accepting damage to deliver damage in return, trusting in their massive bulk and heavy armor to see them through. The Dreadnought meets their charge head, on abandoning any thought of defense. The World Eater within knows, on some level beneath conscious thought, that survival is not the goal here. The goal is to kill, to maximize the damage inflicted, to take as many enemies with him as possible before the inevitable end. He shifts his weight, redirecting his assault cannon toward the closest meganob, and fires at point-blank range. The weapon roars, shells hammering into armor at a distance measured in inches rather than yards. At this range, even mega armor cannot fully withstand the onslaught. Plates crack, buckle, shatter under the sustained barrage. The meganobe screams, a bellowing cry of pain and rage, and lunges forward, driving his power claw into the Dreadnought's weapon arm. The claw's energy field bites deep, crushing the delicate mechanisms that control the assault cannon, and the weapon falls silent, its barrel drooping as hydraulics fail. But the Dreadnought has another weapon. The power fist, damaged but still functional, swings in a wide arc, catching another meganob in the side of the head. The impact is devastating, the Ork's skull crumpling like paper, brain matter spraying in a grotesque arc. The body remains standing for a moment, its nervous system not yet realizing it is dead, before toppling backward to crash into a pile of scrap metal. The remaining meganobes press their attack, coming from all sides now, recognizing that their only chance is to overwhelm this engine of destruction through sheer numbers. Power claws tear at armor plating, ripping away protective layers, seeking the vulnerable systems beneath. One Ork, braver or more foolish than the others, actually climbs onto the Dreadnought's back, his claw tearing at the cables and pipes that run along the machine's spine. The World Eater cannot reach this enemy, cannot bring his weapons to bear on a target so close. But he can move, can throw his weight around, can use the Dreadnought's mass as a weapon in itself. He throws himself backward, crashing into the workshop wall with enough force to shake the entire structure. The Ork on his back is crushed between adamantium armor and reinforced metal, his body pulped to paste, his power claw falling silent as its power source is severed. The wall does not survive the impact. It buckles, collapses, bringing down a section of roof and spilling debris into the workshop. The falling metal crashes into friend and foe alike, crushing one meganobe outright and forcing the others to scatter or be buried. The Dreadnought staggers free of the wreckage, smoke rising from damaged systems, but still functional, still deadly. The war boss, who has been holding back to assess the situation, realizes that if he does not act now, this machine will kill every warrior in the settlement. He bellows his war cry, a sound that rises above the chaos of battle, and charges, his power claw raised high. He brings it down in a massive overhead strike that would bisect most vehicles, a blow powered by hydraulics, muscle, and the absolute certainty that he is the biggest, the baddest, the boss. The Dreadnought raises its power fist to block, and the two weapons meet with a shower of sparks and a sound like thunder. The impact sends shockwaves through both combatants. The Dreadnought's gyro-stabilizers scream in protest, fighting to keep the machine upright against the tremendous force of the blow. The warboss's power armor groans. Stress indicators, flashing red as systems, are pushed beyond their design parameters. For a long moment, machine and Ork are locked together, each pushing against the other, neither giving ground. It is a test of pure strength, of will against will, of chaos, corrupted technology against Ork determination. The workshop floor beneath them cracks, unable to bear the combined weight and force of the struggle. Nearby Orks back away, recognizing that being too close to this clash would be fatal. Then the Dreadnought activates its chainblade. The spinning teeth, still functioning despite the damage the power fist has taken, bite into the warboss's power claw. Metal screams against metal, sparks flying as adamantium teeth meet Ork engineering. The warboss roars in pain and anger as his weapon begins to fail, circuits sparking, hydraulic fluid spraying from severed lines. The claw, which has crushed space marine armor and torn apart Imperial vehicles, starts to come apart under the sustained assault. The warboss realizes his mistake. He has committed too fully to the attack, has put all his strength into a single blow, and now he is trapped, held fast by an enemy who is methodically destroying his primary weapon. He tries to pull away, to disengage and regroup, but the Dreadnought holds him fast. The power fist's grip unbreakable, drawing him closer rather than allowing escape. But the war boss is not alone. While he has the Dreadnought's attention, his remaining meganobes attack from the sides and rear. One of them drives his power claw into the joint, where the Dreadnought's leg meets its torso, tearing through the armor and severing hydraulic lines. Another attacks the weapon arm, his claw crushing the assembly that controls the power fist, causing it to lock open and release the war boss. The Dreadnought stumbles, its damaged leg unable to bear its full weight. It tries to turn, to bring what remains of its weapons to bear on these new threats, but the damage is too severe. The leg gives out entirely, and the machine crashes to its knees, servos screaming in protest. The war boss, freed from the power fist's grip, takes a step back and surveys his damaged opponent. His power claw is ruined, sparking and useless, but he still has his other hand, and more importantly, he still has his pride. No machine, no matter how tough, is going to beat him in his own camp. He raises his shooter and empties the entire magazine into the Dreadnought's head at point blank range. The optical sensors explode. The Vox speakers spark and die. The armor plating cracks and buckles under the sustained fire. But still, the machine tries to rise, tries to fight, the pilot refusing to accept defeat, refusing to stop until his body finally gives out completely. The warboss tosses aside his empty shooter and draws a massive chopper from his back, a blade easily 6 feet long and covered in the rust and dried blood of previous victims. He approaches the still, struggling Dreadnought, raises the blade high, and brings it down directly into the center of the machine's torso, exactly where the sarcophagus containing the pilot would be located. The blade punches through, penetrating the outer armor, the inner structure, the life support systems, the sarcophagus itself. The Dreadnought goes rigid, all movement ceasing instantly. For a long moment, there is silence, broken only by the heavy breathing of the surviving Orks and the hiss of leaking fluids from the ruined machine. Then, slowly, the Dreadnought topples forward, crashing face first into the gore-covered floor of the workshop. It does not move again. The warboss plants one foot on the fallen machine's back and raises his arms in victory.
"Date's what you get for messing with me, boys!
Eyes the biggest,
And don't none of you gits forget it!"
the surviving Orks cheer, their brief fear forgotten in the glory of their boss's victory. The mech boy, if he survived the initial slaughter, is nowhere to be found, having sensibly decided that being elsewhere would be healthier than being present for the aftermath of his disastrous experiment. But this is only one possible outcome. The scenario we have described is one where the Orks have the numbers and the firepower to bring down the awakened Dreadnought before it can kill them all. Not all encounters will end this way. Consider instead what might happen if the Orks are fewer in number, or if the warboss is less skilled, or if the World Eater awakens in a different location where escape is possible. In an alternative scenario, the Dreadnought, awakened and fully armed, does not remain in the mech's workshop. Instead, it breaks free, smashing through the walls and emerging into the larger Ork settlement beyond. What follows is a massacre of epic proportions. A single war machine carving a path of destruction through thousands of Orks who are completely unprepared for the fury that has been unleashed among them. The World Eater, freed from his prison, freed from the forced immobility, feels something approaching joy. The butcher's nails are fully satisfied, their demands being met 100-fold. Everywhere he turns, there are enemies. Everywhere he steps, there is blood to be spilled, skulls to be taken. This is better than any dream, better than any memory. This is paradise. If a World Eater can know such a thing, he wades through the Ork settlement like a reaper through wheat. His weapons, enhanced by the Ork modifications that he no longer registers as violations, perform beyond their original specifications. The makeshift assault cannon fires at a rate that would have overheated the original weapon, but the Ork additions somehow allow it to keep firing. The power fist, strengthened by additional armor and powered by jury-rigged systems, crushes everything it touches. The Orks, to their credit, do not flee. To flee would be un-Orky, and whatever else they are, Orks are not cowards. They gather their weapons and charge, mob after mob, throwing themselves at the Dreadnought in waves. But they are disorganized, without leadership, without a plan beyond. Charge at the big thing and hit it really hard. Against a lesser enemy, this might work through sheer weight of numbers. Against a World Eater's Dreadnought, it is suicide. The battle, such as it is, lasts for hours. The Dreadnought does not tire. It does not need to rest or reload. Its ammunition supplies apparently bottomless, its power cells drawing energy from some source the Orks never fully understood. It simply continues to kill, methodically working its way through the settlement, leaving piles of bodies in its wake. Some Orks try to fight it directly. They die. Some try to flank it, to attack from behind. They die. Some attempt to use heavy weapons, rockets and big shooters, and even one brave Ork who tries to drive a battle wagon straight at the Dreadnought. They all die. The machine is unstoppable, an avatar of Khorne's fury made manifest in adamantium and hate. Eventually, the warboss arrives, summoned from wherever he was by the sounds of sustained combat and the reports that something is killing his entire tribe. By the time he reaches the scene, hundreds of Orks are dead, and the Dreadnought shows no signs of slowing down. The warboss assesses the situation and makes a decision that, for an Ork, shows unusual tactical thinking. He orders a retreat, not a full retreat, not abandoning the settlement entirely, but a pulling back, a consolidation of forces outside the Dreadnought's immediate range. He will not throw more boys into the meat grinder. Instead, he will use the heavy weapons, the artillery, the massed firepower of his entire Y to bring down this invincible enemy. The order goes out, and the surviving Orks fall back, leaving the Dreadnought alone in a settlement now composed largely of corpses. The World Eater, his immediate foes gone, pauses, his sensors scanning for new targets. For a moment, there is silence, broken only by the cooling clicks of overheated weapon barrels and the soft hiss of hydraulics. Then the bombardment begins. Rockets by the dozen arc through the air, impacting around and on the Dreadnought. Big shooters open up from concealed positions, their fire coordinated to hit from multiple angles simultaneously. Even a looted basilisk, its original Imperial markings barely visible under layers of Ork modifications, fires, its massive shell exploding 30 feet from the Dreadnought and showering it with shrapnel. The Dreadnought tries to fight back, but there are no targets within range, just distant flashes of gunfire and the trails of rockets. It begins to move, to charge toward the Ork positions, but the bombardment intensifies. Shells explode around its feet, staggering it. Rockets impact its armor, each one doing minor damage but collectively taking their toll. The sustained fire begins to tell, armor plating cracking, systems failing. The machine slowly being worn down by sheer volume of fire. The World Eater realizes, through the haze of rage and pain, that he is losing. Not through lack of skill or courage, not because his enemies are better warriors, but through simple mathematics. He is one, and they are many. He has limits, even if those limits are higher than most, and they have numbers that can overwhelm any defense. The butcher's nails do not care about this logic. They only care about killing, about continuing the fight, about refusing to surrender, even when surrender would be the rational choice. He charges, ignoring the damage, ignoring the warnings from failing systems, ignoring everything except the need to close with his enemies and make them pay for every hit they have landed. The Orks, seeing him coming, increase their fire rate, desperately trying to stop him before he reaches their lines. Rockets score direct hits on his legs. Big shooter rounds find weaknesses in his armor. The looted basilisk fires again, and this time the shell lands close enough that the blast throws the Dreadnought off balance, sending it crashing to the ground. The World Eater tries to rise, but his damaged legs will not respond. He tries to aim his assault cannon, but the weapon is jammed, its barrel partially melted from sustained fire. The power fist still works, but there is nothing within reach to strike. For the first time since his awakening, the World Eater feels something other than rage. He feels frustration, the bitter knowledge that he has failed, that these miserable Xenos have defeated him not through skill, but through the simple expedient of refusing to engage him on terms he could win. The Orks approach cautiously, weapons ready, uncertain whether the fallen machine is truly disabled or merely waiting for them to come close. The Warbus leads them, his power claw restored and functional, his confidence returning now that the threat appears to be neutralized. He circles the Dreadnought warily, noting the extensive damage, the destroyed weapons, the leaked fluids pooling beneath the machine. Check if it's properly dead, he orders one of his boys. But be careful, could still have some fight left in it. Several Orks approach, prods and sticks in hand, ready to poke the machine from a safe distance. But before they can get close, the Dreadnought's Vox speakers crackle to life one final time. The voice that emerges is barely human, distorted by damage and by the corruption that has claimed it. But the words are clear enough. Blood for the blood god. It rasps, each word taking visible effort. Skulls for the skull throne. Then the speakers die, the last of the power fading, and the Dreadnought is truly still. The Orks stand in silence for a moment, processing what they have just witnessed. Then the Warboss laughs, a booming sound that carries across the battlefield. Well, that was a proper fight.
That was!
Didn't know the ting could talk! Makes it even better that we won. He kicks the Dreadnought's leg, confirming that it is indeed dead. Right then, get Demex to look at this thing. See if any of it's still good. And somebody go find dat git what woke it up. I's got some words for him. But there is yet another scenario we must consider. One more possibility that shows the full horror of this situation. What if the Dreadnought, awakened and enraged, does not remain to fight the Orks? What if, instead, it flees? What if a World Eater, driven by instincts 1,000 years old, realizes that it cannot win this fight and makes the tactical decision to retreat, to escape the Ork settlement and disappear into the wider world? This is perhaps the darkest outcome, the one with the most far-reaching consequences. A World Eater's Dreadnought, modified by Orks but not controlled by them, loose in the galaxy, is a nightmare scenario for anyone unfortunate enough to encounter it. It will not return to its warband, assuming it even remembers having one. It will not seek out other Chaos forces or attempt to rejoin the long war. It will simply wander, killing anything it encounters, leaving a trail of bodies across entire sectors of space. Such a creature would be nearly impossible to stop. Dreadnoughts are already incredibly durable, designed to survive punishments that would destroy lesser machines. This one, enhanced with Ork modifications that somehow make it even tougher and faster, would be a match for most enemies it might encounter. Imperial Guard units would be massacred. Smaller Space Marine forces would struggle to bring it down. Even other Chaos warbands would find it a challenging opponent, and one that refuses to recognize ally from enemy in its madness. Over time, this Dreadnought would become a legend, a ghost story told to frighten new recruits. Tales would spread of a massive war machine, painted in crude reds and festooned with Ork totems, that appears without warning to slaughter entire populations. Some might think it an Ork super weapon. Others might recognize it as Chaos, tainted but be confused by its appearance and behavior. None would suspect the truth that it is a World Eater, awakened after a millennium of darkness, driven mad by both the butcher's nails and the violation of its imprisonment, now existing only to kill until it is finally destroyed. The implications of our scenarios extend beyond the immediate violence, beyond the simple question of who wins the fight. They touch on deeper themes that run throughout the Warhammer 40k universe, themes of duty and madness, of the cost of service, of what happens when ancient powers are disturbed by those who do not understand them. These are not merely stories about violence, though violence is certainly a major component. They are stories about consequences, about the price paid for ambition, about the dangers of ignorance confronting knowledge it cannot comprehend. For the World Eater, this experience represents the ultimate degradation. Consider what has been taken from him, layer by layer, piece by piece. He has already lost his body. given it up not by choice but by necessity, forced to accept interment in a dreadnought as the only alternative to death. He has already lost his humanity, sacrificed it to the butcher's nails and to corn, reduced from a thinking being to a creature of pure rage and instinct. Now he has lost even the dignity of his imprisonment, waking to find himself violated by Xenos, his sacred armor desecrated, his weapons modified by creatures he despises. There is a particular horror in this violation that goes beyond simple vandalism. The World Eaters, for all their madness, for all their corruption, still maintain certain rituals, certain forms that give meaning to their existence. Their armor is more than protection, it is identity, a physical manifestation of who they are and what they serve. Their weapons are not merely tools, they are extensions of themselves, instruments through which they express their devotion to the blood god. To have these things altered, painted over, modified by the crude hands of orcs, is to have one's very self defaced, and yet, in a darkly ironic way, the orc modifications serve to make the dreadnought more effective at what it does. The additional armor provides better protection. The enhanced weapons deliver more destruction. The improved locomotion systems grant greater mobility. In trying to make the machine more orky, the mech boy has accidentally made it a better instrument of Khorne's will. The World Eater, in his rare moments of lucidity between bouts of rage, might recognize this and find it somehow more offensive than if the modifications had weakened him. There is no happy ending for him. Either he dies fighting the orcs, which might be the best outcome he could hope for, a warrior's death in battle rather than another millennium of tortured half-life, or he survives to continue his existence as a broken, wandering engine of destruction, no longer serving any legion or warband, but simply killing until someone finally destroys him and grants him the peace he has been denied for so long. Both outcomes are tragedies. Both represent the complete failure of everything he once was. For the orcs, this encounter serves as a reminder of their own nature, though they would never frame it in such terms. They are scavengers, looters, creatures who take the creations of others and repurpose them, without understanding or respect for what those creations originally were. This approach has served them well throughout their existence. It has given them access to weapons and vehicles they could never build themselves, has allowed them to punch above their technological weight, has made them a persistent threat despite their relatively primitive industry. But sometimes, as in this case, their looting goes horribly wrong. They awaken something that cannot be controlled or reasoned with, something that turns on them with a fury that makes their own love of violence seem restrained by comparison. The orcs will suffer for this, will pay in blood for the mech boy's curiosity and overconfidence. Many will die, the settlement may be destroyed, and yet the survivors will learn nothing from this experience. The next time they find something interesting, something big and powerful, and covered in mysterious symbols, they will do exactly the same thing. They will drag it back to their camp, poke at it until they understand how it works, and then wake it up to see what happens. Because that is what orcs do. That is their nature. They are optimists in the most dangerous sense of the word, absolutely convinced that whatever happens will work out in their favor, because they are orcs and orcs always find a way. This particular brand of dangerous optimism is both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. It allows them to attempt things that more cautious species would never consider, to take risks that would paralyze more thoughtful civilizations with fear of consequences. But it also means they never learn from their mistakes, never develop the kind of institutional knowledge that would prevent them from making the same errors repeatedly. Each Y effectively starts from scratch, building up technology and tactics through trial and error, losing all that accumulated knowledge when the warg ends and the orcs disperse. For the wider galaxy, scenarios like this one play out constantly, in countless variations, across 1 million worlds. The 41st millennium is full of forgotten weapons, ancient machines left over from wars long ended, artifacts of lost civilizations, waiting to be discovered by those who lack the wisdom to leave them alone. Every day, somewhere in the vastness of space, Someone finds something they should not have found, awakens something that should have remained sleeping, unleashes forces they cannot hope to control. Sometimes these discoveries lead to great advances, to the recovery of precious technology or knowledge that has been lost for millennia. The Mechanicus builds its entire religion around the search for such artifacts, sending out explorator fleets to scour dead worlds and forgotten systems for STC fragments and ancient tech. Sometimes they find treasures that justify the search, pieces of knowledge that push back the slow decline of Imperial technology. More often, though, these discoveries lead to disasters, to awakenings that should never have occurred, to horrors unleashed that take entire armies to contain. The galaxy is littered with the remains of expeditions that found things they should have left alone. Outposts wiped out by awakened Necrons, research stations consumed by demonic incursions, colonies destroyed by ancient weapons that should have remained buried. The World Eaters themselves are a cautionary tale about the cost of victory at any price, about what happens when the ends are allowed to justify any means. They were created to be weapons, the Emperor's own instruments of conquest, designed to take worlds through sheer brutality and aggression. They succeeded in that purpose, perhaps too well. The butcher's nails that Angron inflicted upon his legion did make them more effective killers, did allow them to take worlds that might otherwise have resisted. But the cost was their humanity, their ability to be anything other than killers, their capacity to serve the Imperium in any role except that of destroyers. Consider what this means in practical terms. A Space Marine Legion is supposed to be a versatile force, capable of fighting in any environment, against any enemy, using whatever tactics the situation demands. The World Eaters, even before the Nails, were specialists in assault and close combat. They were the hammers in the Emperor's arsenal, the blunt instruments you sent when you needed something broken quickly and thoroughly. But they could still function as Space Marines, could still hold territory, conduct reconnaissance, operate independently for extended periods. After the Nails, they became increasingly one-dimensional. Their tactical flexibility disappeared, replaced by a single approach to every problem: charge forward and kill everything. Complex operations became impossible. Stealth and subtlety were abandoned. They could no longer be trusted with missions that required patience or restraint. They had been optimized for a single purpose, and in the process, everything else had been discarded as unnecessary. When they fell to chaos, when they became the willing servants of Khorne, they at least found a purpose that aligned with their nature. The Blood God does not ask for subtlety or restraint. He does not demand complex strategies or careful planning. He wants blood and skulls, violence and death, and the World Eaters are perfectly designed to provide these things. In a twisted way, their corruption by chaos was less a fall from grace and more a recognition of what they had already become. A formalization of a relationship that had existed in everything, but named since the first nail was hammered into the first World Eater's skull. But that purpose is ultimately empty. An endless cycle of violence with no goal beyond more violence, no achievement beyond more killing. What does it profit a warrior to spend 10,000 years taking skulls for the skull throne? What is gained by an eternity of battle, with no objective except the next battle? The World Eaters have no long-term goals, no grand strategy, no vision of what they are fighting for beyond the next moment of relief from the Nail's demands. A World Eater in a Dreadnought is the logical endpoint of this philosophy, a being reduced to its most basic function, killing, with everything else stripped away. Not a person, not even really a warrior in any meaningful sense, but a weapon that happens to be conscious, a gun that can think but cannot do anything except shoot. The tragedy is that this fate is considered an honor by the World Eaters. That interment in a Dreadnought is seen as a reward rather than a punishment. To be interred in a Dreadnought means your service continues, that you are too valuable to be allowed to die. For a loyalist chapter, this might be true. A venerable Dreadnought can serve for thousands of years, offering wisdom and experience to new generations, standing as a living link to the chapter's glorious past. His counsel is sought on important matters, His presence inspires those around him. He is honored and respected, a father figure to warriors who never knew their actual fathers. For the World Eaters, it is a lie, a delusion that masks the reality that you are being punished, not rewarded, condemned to an eternity of pain and rage from which death is the only escape. There is no wisdom to offer when the nails have burned away everything except fury. There is no counsel to give when you can barely remember your own name through the haze of constant agony. There is no inspiration to provide when your existence is nothing but torture. The World Eaters who are interred in dreadnoughts continue to serve not because they choose to, not because they find meaning in their service, but because they are given no alternative. They are locked in place, their weapons trained on enemies, their consciousness preserved against their will, forced to continue fighting long past the point where death would have been a mercy. This is not honor. This is cruelty, the final exploitation of warriors who have already given everything. Our scenario, then, is not just about what happens when orcs find a sleeping dreadnought. It is about the layers of tragedy and horror that define existence in the 41st millennium. It is about the fate of those who serve powers they cannot control, who dedicate themselves to causes that will ultimately destroy them. It is about the collision of different forms of insanity, the engineered madness of the World Eaters and the natural madness of the Orks, each form terrible in its own way, each producing victims who deserve better than the fate they receive. Most of all, it is about the simple fact that in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no peace, no respite, no rest for anyone. Even death is not an escape, not when technology can preserve consciousness long past the point where it should have been allowed to fade. 1,000 years of sleep is not rest, when dreams are nightmares, when consciousness is torture, when awakening means returning to a pain that never ends. And when that awakening comes at the hands of beings who do not understand what they have found, who violate the very tome meant to contain that suffering, the result is a horror that benefits no one and resolves nothing. Our scenario, then, is not just about what happens when orcs find a sleeping dreadnought. It is about the layers of tragedy and horror that define existence in the 41st millennium. It is about the fate of those who serve powers they cannot control, who dedicate themselves to causes that will ultimately destroy them. It is about the collision of different forms of insanity, the engineered madness of the World Eaters and the natural madness of the Orks. Most of all, it is about the simple fact that in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no peace, no respite, no rest for anyone. Even death is not an escape. Not when technology can preserve consciousness long past the point where it should have been allowed to fade. 1,000 years of sleep is not rest when dreams are nightmares, when consciousness is torture, when awakening means returning to a pain that never ends. The World Eater who sleeps beneath the rubble does not know he is about to be found. He does not know that his millennium of darkness is about to end in the worst possible way. He simply dreams his bloody dreams and waits for whatever comes next. Trapped in a cycle from which there is no escape, serving gods who care nothing for his suffering. Entombed in metal that will be his prison until someone finally destroys it and grants him the peace he has been denied for so long. And when the Orks do find him, when they wake him to chaos and violation, when he explodes into the violence that has been building for 1,000 years, they will not understand what they have unleashed. They will see only another fight, another enemy to overcome, another piece of scrap to be claimed. They will not comprehend the depth of the rage they face, the weight of centuries of accumulated fury, the absolute determination to make someone, anyone, pay for the suffering that defines every moment of existence. This, then, is what happens when Orks capture a World Eater's dreadnought that has slept for 1,000 years. Violence happens, death happens, tragedy happens, played out in a cascade of increasingly poor decisions by both sides, leading inevitably to outcomes that satisfy no one and solve nothing. The dreadnought either dies or escapes to cause more death elsewhere. The Orks either defeat it and learn nothing from the experience, or they are slaughtered and simply respawn from their spores to try again. The galaxy continues its slow spiral toward oblivion, one small horror at a time, each incident contributing to the larger tragedy that defines humanity's existence in this age of darkness. And somewhere, in the warp beyond reality, Khorne watches and laughs. Blood has been spilled. Skulls have been taken. His servants have done their work, whether they meant to or not, whether they survived or not. That is all that matters to the blood god. The details, the individual suffering, the personal tragedies, all of this is meaningless to a being who cares only for the flow of blood and the ring of steel. The World Eater has served his purpose. The Orks have served their purpose. The conflict has added to the infinite tally of violence that feeds the chaos gods, and that is all the meaning this encounter will ever have. There is no moral to this story. No lesson to be learned, except perhaps the obvious one. Do not wake the sleeping monsters. Do not meddle with forces beyond your understanding. Do not assume that just because something is valuable, it is also safe to claim. But these are lessons the inhabitants of the 41st millennium learned long ago and ignored just as long ago, because the alternative is to admit defeat, to give up, to stop trying to survive in a universe that wants nothing more than to grind them all into dust. So the Orks will continue to loot, to tinker, to wake things that should stay sleeping, and the World Eaters will continue to rage, to kill, to suffer through existence in metal tombs that preserve them far beyond any sane span of life. And the galaxy will continue to be the setting for a million small horrors like this one, each tragedy feeding into the larger tragedy, each death contributing to the endless war that defines all existence in the grim darkness of the far future. This is the nature of Warhammer 40k. This is what makes these stories so compelling despite their darkness, or perhaps because of it. We watch these disasters unfold not because we expect them to end well, but because we want to see how far the horror can go, how much suffering can be compressed into a single narrative, how many different kinds of wrong can occur simultaneously. We are drawn to these stories because they show us humanity at its worst and alien life at its most inhuman, and in doing so, they help us appreciate the reality we actually inhabit, where at least our wars end and our dead stay dead, and our machines do not house the tortured consciousness of ancient warriors, driven mad by technology, designed to make them better killers. So if you have enjoyed this exploration of one small corner of grimdark horror, if you have found something compelling in the tale of a World Eater awakened, after 1,000 years of nightmares, by the worst neighbors anyone could ask for, then consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with others who appreciate the darker side of science fiction. There are countless other stories to tell from the Warhammer 40k universe, countless other scenarios where ancient evils meet modern stupidity, where the plans of gods and monsters collide with the chaos of actual reality. Until next time, remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And sometimes, that war starts because an orc found something shiny and decided to see what would happen if he flipped some switches. The results are always catastrophic, always violent, and always, in their own terrible way, absolutely fascinating.